Okay, good morning, beautiful humans. I hope you're still doing well out there. I hope you're staying in, spending time with your family, washing your hands, all of that fun and exciting stuff. We're doing well here. My cat is asleep next to me, so that's very exciting. Okay, so yesterday, when we left off, we had talked about how the major organs of the urinary system, what the overall function is, that your urinary system is mostly there to filter your blood, to maintain your blood pressure and the balances of all of the stuff that's supposed to be dissolved in your blood, and how the kidneys are the major organ that makes this happen. We talked about how the renal artery takes blood into the kidneys for filtration, how the renal vein takes it back out. We talked about the kidneys and the different parts there. We talked about the ureter that carries the urine down to the bladder that stores it, and the urethra that releases it from the body and helps control the flow. So today we're going to get up close and personal with what are called the nephrons. These are the interior structures inside of the kidneys that enable them to do their job. They are very small. There are actual thousands of them in there. I want to say tens to hundreds of thousands, but I would need to go look up my numbers before I could say that for sure. Suffice it to say they are small. There are many of them. And we call them the structural and functional units of the kidneys, meaning that they are what the kidney is made out of that enables it to do its job. If we get a chance, I don't think we will, unfortunately, but maybe in the fetal pig, we'll open up the kidney and look at it. You won't really be able to see the nephrons. You'll be able to see that it has kind of a grainy texture in the flesh of the kidney, but there's not like, the nephron is not visible. It's too small for that. The main job of the nephrons is to take anything that's not supposed to be in the blood and put it into the urine, and then send it along down into that pelvis of the kidney to be carried to the bladder. The nephron comes to you in two main parts. It has the glomerulus, which is one of my favorite words in the English language, and the renal tubule. A quick word on the nephron before we get started. This is fiddly. I'm giving you the simplified version because some of you are going to need to know it in a lot of detail later in life. If you go to medical school, you are going to have to know all of the fiddly details of the nephron and what happens in each part of it. If you go and take anatomy in college or nursing anatomy, you're going to see this again. So my goal right now is just to provide you with an introduction so that when you see this again later, you feel a little more prepared to learn all of the nitty-gritty details because you've at least seen the basics. That's my goal. This is going to be a little bit oversimplified. So, disclaimer. All right, let's talk about the parts of the nephron. The glomerulus is a ball of leaky capillaries, essentially. So you might remember from the circulatory system, capillaries are our tiniest blood vessels. Their cell wall, or not cell walls, the walls of capillaries are about 1 cell thick, and they are kind of thin little things at the best of times. In the glomerulus specifically, they are kind of tangled around each other like a little ball of yarn, and they are deliberately leaky. They do not hold fluid in well. The holes, it's like almost like a strainer, like you would strain spaghetti in your kitchen. The holes are small enough that the spaghetti doesn't go through, but all of the water or the spices or whatever you put on your pasta will go straight through the strainer and into the sink. So we hold back the red blood cells and the white blood cells. Those are supposed to stay inside of the capillaries, but pretty much everything else is going to come out into this capsule space around the glomerulus. Another structure you'll notice while we're in the area, we have the afferent or afferent arteriole. That's the one that carries the blood into the glomerulus. Notice that it's quite large compared to the efferent arteriole, which is quite small. If you think about this, if you take a big pipe and then you contract it and force all of the liquid that's in the big pipe to go into the smaller pipe, you're going to have pressure at the point where those meet. You're going to have a high fluid pressure. The kidney actually depends on that for its function because it creates pressure inside of the glomerulus that encourages more of that liquid in the blood to leak out. So again, afferent in, efferent out. I think of E for efferent and E for exit, if that helps you. It helps me. All right, let's talk about what happens to that fluid that is leaked out of the blood. it goes into what's called the glomerular capsule, or a lot of times you will hear older medical people or older scientists call it the Bowman's capsule. It's named after someone named Bowman way back in the day. That was the guy's last name. Its job is to capture all of that liquid that comes out of the glomerulus and catch it, just like the fallopian tubes used to catch the eggs when we talked about the reproductive system. It receives that filtrate, which is basically just the plasma from that blood in the capillaries, and it passes it along to the next stage of the process. Okay, the next stage of the process is the renal tubule. Bowman's capsule, or the glomerular capsule, is just one part of that. Don't panic. Take a deep breath. I'm going to walk you through the parts. If you don't catch something, you can go back to the beginning of me talking about it and you can listen to it again. Or you can ask me questions in the comments or on Google Classroom or in my email. You have lots of ways to get a hold of me if you're stuck. Okay, so the blood is inside of the glomerulus. The plasma of the blood leaks out. It's caught by Bowman's capsule. The next place that filtrate is going to go is into the rest of the renal tubule. The main first part of it, remember, pro means first, proximal means closer, so this is the proximal convoluted tubule. It's the first place that this fluid goes. It's called convoluted because it means like tangled or complicated. So the proximal convoluted tubule, followed by this loop of Henle, or you'll also hear it called the Nephron loop, either one. That's another one where it has multiple names depending on who you ask. It's kind of changed as time goes on. We're trying to switch to calling it the Nephron loop because we're trying to get rid of the tradition of naming things after old dead guys. Finally, we have the distal convoluted tubule. Remember, proximal is near, distal is far, so this is the last stage of the Nephron loop. This whole renal tubule basically has the main job of deciding which things that were filtered out of the blood shouldn't have been. So, for example, when you do that glomerulus, when it filters the blood, nearly all of the liquid in the blood comes out and goes into the renal capsule, or the glomerular capsule. Do we want to lose every single bit of fluid in your blood every time you filter your blood? No, you would die of dehydration very quickly. So one of the jobs that this whole area has, this whole renal tubule, is to return that excess water that was removed from the blood. Also salt. Pretty much all of the salt is going to go straight through those capillaries and come out into what would eventually be your urine. We can't have you peeing out all of your salt every time you make urine. That's not a good situation. So that gets returned by the renal tubule. There are also certain things that go the other way, things that are saved during filtration that we don't actually want to be saved, that get pushed into this renal tubule at a later point. We'll worry about that in a minute here. Okay, so finally, after we're done with the renal tubule, whatever is still left by the end of the distal convoluted tubule inside there becomes the final product, urine. And once we get to the collecting duct, it isn't changed anymore. It goes in there, and that carries it down into the pelvis of the kidney, and then it goes from there to the ureter, to the bladder, to the urethra. It leaves your body as urine. That's kind of the whole end goal of the process. So that's the nephron. It has two main jobs. Or just another way to break down what we just talked about. Filtration is the part that happens in the glomerulus, where we leak all of the plasma. Reabsorption is where the renal tubule returns anything that we shouldn't have taken. And then this third arrow represents a final stage called secretion, which we won't worry about in too much detail, but that's where some of the things that ended up in that blood that we actually still don't want to keep get like actively put into the urine to make sure we get rid of them. So, let's take it piece by piece. Hopefully at this point this is starting to sound familiar. Filtration is where those water and solutes, the blood plasma, are forced out through the glomerulus, through those leaky capillary walls by that pressure. Blood cells are supposed to remain in the capillaries. You should not have blood cells in your urine, either red or white. If you do, that's a sign something's wrong, whether your nephron is leaking or potentially that you have bleeding somewhere in the urinary tract, like later on. Like kidney stones sometimes will tear up the inside of the ureter enough to make you bleed into your urine, and that's not uncommon either. Either way, though, something's not right if there's blood in your urine. Filtrate is collected in that glomerular capsule, or the Bowman's capsule, and travels down into the renal tubule. Filtration, like we said, is non-selective, so your body is not choosy, it's just whatever comes out, and it's passive. The body doesn't have any control over it. It just happens. It's the same no matter what's going on in your body, no matter whether you're dehydrated or overhydrated. No control over how that goes. Reabsorption is the opposite. This is under control of your hormones. It's very finely tuned to your body's needs. So most of the time during reabsorption, your body's going to save most of that water back. It's going to reabsorb it and keep it inside of the body. It's going to reabsorb glucose. We can't let energy go to waste. We need that. If you have glucose in your urine, it's a sign that something has gone wrong, usually diabetes. Amino acids are returned. They're an important building block of life. We don't want to lose those. And a lot of the time, ions, especially sodium, which is controlled by aldosterone, you guys remember, that instructs the body to retain sodium. So those ions are saved by the kidney or by the nephron as well, so that you don't get electrolyte deficiencies every time you pee. And again, the big difference there, filtration is passive and it's uncontrolled. Reabsorption is very finely tuned, mostly by your hormones. If this whole process is working correctly, urine should be light yellow. It's normal for some of your blood cells to be broken down, to come to the end of their life. That hemoglobin gets broken down. It makes urochrome, and that goes into your urine. By the way, it also makes bilirubin. You guys might remember from way back in the integumentary system, we talked about jaundice and how liver damage can be shown by the fact that you have too much bilirubin in your skin and your blood. Just in the same way, if you've got urochrome in the wrong quantities, it can be a sign that something's wrong with your kidneys, so that's not a fun time. Urine should be sterile. There's not supposed to be any bacteria in there. This is actually why in the Middle Ages they used the urine of a baby. It was an ingredient in a lot of medications that people would actually drink, because in a lot of cases it was cleaner than the water in your well. If you did not have, you only need a couple of birds pooping in your well water for it to be less clean than a baby's urine. So there you go. Slightly aromatic. It's normal for urine to have a little bit of a smell. If it's super strong, that's usually a sign that there's dehydration, that you ate something weird, or it can be a sign of some sort of infection or other negative situation in the body, or it can be a side effect of certain medications if urine has a strong, weird smell. Urine normally has a slightly acidic pH. Somewhere between 4.5 and 8 is considered normal, though, so it can be a little bit basic and still be okay, because this is how your body gets rid of anything super acidic or basic that you ate in order to balance out the pH of your blood. This is, by the way, one reason why people with kidney stones are sometimes put on special diets. If you have too much, I believe it is if your urine is too basic, it makes you more likely to get kidney stones. So they are instructed to avoid foods that make your urine more basic in order to protect them from those forming. Urine is supposed to have a specific gravity between 1.001 and 1.035. I don't know if you guys have gotten here in chemistry and or physics yet, or if that even comes up, but the specific gravity of water is 1.000000 umpty million zeros. That's the definition of how density works. So the closer you are to 1 even, the higher percentage of that urine is water. 1.001 would be very hydrated. 1.035 is the fringe of where you're starting to move towards being dehydrated. The urine will have more stuff in it compared to the amount of water. So if somebody is at, like, almost exactly at 1, that can be a sign of something like diabetes insipidus. If they're at like 1.04, that can be a sign that they are dehydrated in some way. So things your urine should not contain, and kind of the things that can mean. If it contains sugar, that can be a sign of diabetes mellitus, not diabetes insipidus. Remember, we know the difference now. Diabetes mellitus, type 1 or type 2, is sugar diabetes. Diabetes insipidus would be the urine is too watery due to a hormone problem with your ADH or your aldosterone. Bilirubin is a sign of liver problems. And if a person has bilirubin in their urine, they might very well have it in their skin too, and then you'd be able to see the jaundice on their face. Protein is a sign that those nephrons are leaking and they are damaged, and that is a sign of renal failure. Your kidneys are dying, which is not a fun way to go, by the way. That's how you end up on dialysis, to prevent you from dying unpleasantly. Red blood cells, as I said earlier, can be a sign that there's a kidney stone in there somewhere tearing up the ureter, or a sign that there's other kinds of damage to the nephrons. So renal failure can eventually lead to some RBCs in your blood, or in your urine as well. And WBCs, if you're finding them in there, is usually a sign that your body is sending them there on purpose in order to fight off a urinary tract infection, which is not a good thing either. Although it is a sign that your body is responding correctly to that problem, it wouldn't have to do it if you didn't have an infection in the first place. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get back in the next month or so and actually do this lab that we are going to do, where you get to sample different fake urines and like diagnose the person based on what's in there. I hope that we're able to do that. I don't know for sure if that's going to happen. Maybe I can find you a case study or something where you can at least interact with it a little bit. Water balance inside of your body these are not, okay, first, disclaimer, those percentages are not percentages for your urine. Those are percentages for the body as a whole. So you might hear the statistic that you are 60% or 70% water. That depends a lot on your age and your sex. Females tend to have a higher fat percentage and a lower muscle percentage, so we tend to have a lower water percentage in our body than males who have more muscle. Babies are like mostly water by volume. It's just the thing about how they are. And I thought this was interesting. I didn't know this until I started preparing for this unit, but people who are older, males and females start being more the same, which makes sense. Your hormone levels are dropping. Also, it's a much lower percentage of water, and if you look at the skin of an elderly person, you can actually see that. That's part of the reason that their skin is thinner, it's more wrinkled, there's not as much fluid underneath. Their skin tends to be drier and more fragile. So I thought that was interesting. Of course, water is necessary for your body. You can't let your water level get too low. That will kill you very effectively. Also, part of how your body controls the amount of water is by controlling the amount of salt in your blood. So changes in electrolyte balance in the amount of salt affect the water balance in the body. We should do this in bio, but I don't think that we did the year that you guys were freshmen, so let's talk about this a little bit. Salt sucks is the term that we use to describe this. It's called osmosis. If you have high salt in the blood, it's going to pull water out of the cells, which raises your blood pressure and dehydrates your cells. That's why people who are suffering from high blood pressure tend to be put on low salt diets. It helps keep the blood pressure from rising because there is not as much salt in the blood. If you have low salt in your blood, the opposite will happen. There will be more salt in your cells than in the blood. Again, salt sucks. And that will actually pull fluid into the cells, which can swell them or even damage them and lower your blood pressure. So if a person has excessively low blood sodium, that can start to cause other problems. Also, bear in mind, your nerve cells need salt to function properly. It's part of their signal mechanism, so your brain is one of the things that will start to go wrong first if you don't have electrolytes. It's also why people with low sodium sometimes are more prone to like cramps and Charlie horses, especially athletes, because the nerves will get confused about whether they're supposed to fire or not and will contract muscles more than they should or in the wrong way. There is a medical condition for this, hyponatremia, which refers to not having enough sodium in the blood. Maintaining water balance. This refers to just, if you think about it, this is very intuitive. The amount of water that goes into your body needs to be enough to balance out the amount of water that you release in your urine. Most of the water that you need comes from the foods that you eat and the beverages that you drink. But you do also, if you recall from biology, one of the products of cell respiration is water. So you do make some of your own water in-house. A word on beverages, because somebody asks me this every year. Yes, you are somewhat hydrated by drinking things like soda and juice. It's better than not drinking at all, but it is not as hydrating as something like water that is pure, because it comes with other stuff dissolved in it, so it raises the concentration of other stuff in your blood too. Alcohol is, especially strong alcoholic beverages, dehydrate you, because alcohol is a diuretic. It triggers your body to release more water in your urine than you actually need to. And so that can actually dehydrate you. If you try to stay hydrated by drinking vodka, you're going to die. That's not a good idea. Places that you lose water, obviously urine. If you think about it, feces does have a water content to it. It's actually a pretty important ingredient. If it's totally dried out, that's constipation, and that's not a good time. Perspiration or sweating, you lose some water there. Even if you're in like a cool room, you sweat a little bit all of the time just to keep your skin moist, so you lose a little bit. If you are out in the heat working hard, you can lose like a half gallon more water per day, which is why it's very important to stay hydrated if you're working out in the sun. Also, and this is cool because it's the same principle as why breathalyzer tests work, water vaporizes out through the alveoli in your lungs. So just like any alcohol that's dissolved in your blood will jump across that alveolar membrane into the air that you exhale, so will the water in your blood. Those little tiny capillary single cell linings are so thin that the water can't help but move across it a little bit, even though that's not actually the goal. And that's not all bad, because it keeps the inside of the lungs and the trachea moist, which is how they should be. We don't want them to dry out. That would be bad. So, oh, and because somebody always asks, drinking your own urine is not poisonous. It will not kill you, but it will make you more dehydrated, because you are taking all of that waste that was supposed to be removed from your body and you're putting it right back in. So you're not actually increasing the cleanness of the blood in your. One of the major reasons you need to drink water is so that your body can be flushing all of this waste out of itself. It makes waste all the time. If you put the water back, but you also put the waste back at the same time, you've actually made the situation worse, not better. So there's nothing toxic in there, but it is, if you don't drink real water, you're going to get more dehydrated. So on a desert island, don't drink your pee unless you have a way to boil it so that you get the water out of it and separate that from the stuff that's dissolved in it. How do I get into these conversations? Even by myself, I manage it. All right. Maintaining water balance. Dilute urine is a way of getting rid of excess water, so the waterier it is, the more it helps you balance out being a little overhydrated. Overhydrated is mostly okay, as long as you are also getting enough salt with it. It's okay to drink a little too much water. It's much worse to not get enough. Less urine is produced if large amounts of water are lost, so you're dehydrated, your urine gets darker in color, more concentrated, and your blood needs to be maintained so that the electrolytes are balanced correctly. So you're not losing too much sodium, you have enough potassium, all of that good stuff. This is mostly controlled by hormones. Again, here are some old friends. Antidiuretic hormone prevents excessive water loss in the urine. Aldosterone, mostly its job is to retain sodium, But as we saw, wherever sodium is, water will follow. So salt sucks, it saves the water, it keeps it inside of your body, which is why aldosterone saves water. It's not actually primarily what it does is it saves sodium, but that encourages your body to hang on to water as well, just because of the way your fluid balance works. There are cells inside of the kidneys and in the hypothalamus of your brain, both of which keep track of what all is dissolved in your blood, how concentrated it is, what we need to keep, and what we need to get rid of. All right, we're getting there, guys. We're almost done. So acid-base balance in the blood is another thing that's maintained by the kidneys. The blood pH really should remain between 7.35 and 7.45 to maintain homeostasis, so just a tiny bit basic. Remember, your urine is usually a tiny bit acidic, so that's partially why it's pulling any acidic H+ ions out of your blood as they arrive and sending them out in your urine. If your blood, not your urine, but if your blood pH is too high, if it's above 7.45, we call that alkalosis. If it's below 7.35, that's acidosis. So your blood has a very, very thin range where it actually is working properly. If it gets above or below that, we start to see all kinds of fun things going wrong. Urine can fluctuate a lot more wildly because its job is to be the trash can. It's getting rid of whatever is in your body that you don't need right now. So it flushes excess H+ ions. Sometimes it'll flush basic ions to get rid of those to help balance you out. The normal pH of your urine on average is 6, but as we saw, anywhere between like 4.5 and 8 can be normal depending on what you've been eating. And this is just some fun facts. Control of your voluntary urethral sphincter does not start until age 18 months. That's why we can't potty train infants. Although there are cultures that start pretty surprisingly young. There's a culture, I think in Africa somewhere, where they teach babies to pee on command by like they whistle and then the baby just sort of reflexively pees. I don't know. That's kind of cool. So this varies a little bit. But point is, it does not start to be voluntarily controlled right away. That's something your body gains the ability to do as you get a little older. And before old age, most people are not going to have kidney troubles. That's not a system that usually breaks, other than, as I said, urinary infections, which is why proper hygiene, not wiping back to front, and peeing after any kind of sexual contact are important. Keeping yourself healthy measures. Okay, so there you go. That's the urinary system for you. Since you have it on video, I encourage you to go back and like fast forward me, pause me, rewind me, anything you need to do. If you have questions, put them in the comments, put them on Classroom, email me, whatever y'all need. I'll be around and I'll be keeping an eye out. Hope you're having an excellent day. Yeah, take care of yourselves. Bye.